This is Gippsland FM, your community connection here on a very, very balmy, hot day. The temperature is, it says it's 30 degrees out there with a chance of a thunderstorm, so don't go hanging your washing out just yet because tomorrow it is going to be spectacular. It's going to a low of 9 and a top of 25, clear skies, beautiful day to get out for a walk, enjoy the beautiful nature that we have here in Latrobe City. This is Business, Wealth and Mental Health, a show that explores how thriving businesses, wise financial management, if I can say that correctly, and peaceful relationships are good for your mental health. And today I have the very lovely Tracy Anton with me. Tracy's from Flow, or otherwise known as Friends of Latrobe Water. Tracy, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you, Damien.
Now, let's jump in and tell us a bit about your background. You're very passionate in the community. You're from Toongabbie, if I understand correctly. Tell us about Flow. What is it? What does it do? What are you aiming to achieve?
Flow was formed when the Latrobe Valley was going into rehabilitation mode. So we were approached by Environmental Justice Australia, which are an environmental lawyer group, and they sort of knew a few people. We're a mix of, I do investigative research, a couple of them are already coal activists. And so we formed to be clients of them to actually interact with the government and be that conduit between the government and the community.
So part of what you do, if I understand correctly, is you're kind of aiming to be an independent body that's also keeping them honest, which is, there's a few groups around here that keeps the government honest. Tell us about how you do that.
Yeah, so what we do know is generally, and what's happened in the past with Latrobe Valley, that the community is only presented with the high-level information. It's not necessarily factual, can be misleading. And so we find that a lot of sort of other people with loud voices take on this role of misinformation. And there's a lot of it on social media. I think people would be aware of it. And we're trying to make sure that the right information is correct and that the community get the best information and it is relevant to us. It's not generalizations, it's relevant to what we need here in the Valley to actually be able to participate in the decision making.
Well, it's not just social media as well. There's a lot of turning away from the access media because that exact thing, there's information that's being put forward which isn't complete and isn't correct. So how do you actually address that? How do you bring that to attention? How do you fight against that?
Yeah, there's actually a real fight with us against media. So I congratulate you on having this discussion because we find that the big voices like the politicians, they get on and they do their marketing spiel about what's going on. And, you're given, and even some of the television, and great, they give us a voice, but it's tokenistic. That we can't, they don't want to be biased, but we're going, hang on a minute, that's not actually what's going on. This is what's going on. But we can't get that voice out to the masses. So that's the problem. How best do you get that voice out? How do you engage them? And we have a really good email list that we get support even from Environment Victoria for that. So we're not an environmental group as such. We're actively working with government and respected by government. We're an active stakeholder in this process on policy to make sure that it's accountable.
And part of what is happening there as well, a lot of people don't realise this, but a lot of the news is actually how the news is structured is based on some Bernaysian marketing principles, which, as you may be aware, Edward Bernays was the nephew, I think it was, of, now I've got his name, Freud.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and so he developed the marketing techniques where you bypass the conscious, you tap into beliefs and emotion. And a lot of the media that's out there at the moment, especially on the access media, is very much tied to beliefs. You look at, there's people that will watch Fox, there's people that watch the ABC, and it's very aligned to their beliefs, and it does skip a lot of the truth. And I've seen that in a number of the reports that I've been involved in preparing, where there's information, they just go, we don't want that in the report. And I'm just wondering, have you seen from that perspective as well, people then start to believe that as the truth?
Yes, definitely. We've had the opportunity to get some of our stories in the Age, but it's that, what we want to talk about down here, they said, well, that's no good for the Melbourne audience. We said, but then you're actually skipping over the relevant. You'll get, a couple of sentences. How can you tell the story in a couple of sentences? And so there's this big battle, and the big issue down here is water going into the rehabilitation. And one of the major papers said, well, water's just not interesting enough. I said, well, there's more to water than just the Murray-Darling Basin.
Yeah.
You know, that we've got to come down and we've got to bring that. But there's editorial direction, and, you know, and it's so hard to actually talk about the contamination, what's going into the system. But we know we're on the right track, because as much as when people talk about social license and government want to say they've engaged with you, ultimately the decisions are made in the policy room. So that's where we sit. Now, if we can make sure that that is factual, it's and accountable, and then it's transparent, and we know we've had successes, well, then we're happy with that. And we're very open about that, and that people can see all our submissions. And that's why we know that we're active stakeholders. I know there was one, I was talking with one of the miners, your lawn miners, and the manager, he goes, nobody's ever spoken to us like that. And I said, well, that's because, you know, we know the facts. This is what we want. They presented something to us. We sat there listened for a while, and I've just said, well, you've just told us a whole heap of, you know, crap, really. And they just laughed at us. I said, well, we'll tell you what we do know. And that just opened the discussion. And that's where we've got that sort of rapport with the government now. They can't put one over us. They actually come to us and go, okay, we get a phone call and go, what do you think? This is what we want to do before we present it to the community. And we go, well, this is what you need to put in it.
Is that part of when you're talking about dealing with the government as well, is establishing your credibility? Because a lot of the times when you look at the government and the people that are in those positions, they're not experts in that particular area. They're appointed to a cabinet position. They get a report from somebody, and then they're very good at speaking that. And that's a great skill. It's not criticism to the politicians. They have a good ability to take a report that's given to them and then present that to the people in a way that's compelling. Now, the question that comes back to that again is the report they're relying upon reliable and credible and factual?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point, because when I first started hitting sort of this sort of research element, I was trained by an investigative researcher, and I used to write some articles for Independent Australia Online, and that was about the onshore gas debate. And you can go down 100 rabbit holes, but you might get that one bit of information that's got you. So all these reports will have references. So you need to go into the reference and go, what have they cherry picked out of that reference? And is it outdated? And that's what I do. And so then you connect the dots, and then you can actually go back to them and go, here it is. This is the problem. This is what you've done, which we did with the report for the government recently put out a risk assessment report for the water entitlements. We said, you forgot to mention that the Morwell River diversion, it's the levee that goes through the Yallourn mine, will eventually collapse, which Yallourn have admitted. Now, this might be a surprise to a lot of people, but it's always been spoken about as interconnected lakes. So Morwell River will cease to be a continuous flow. And said, how can you do a risk assessment if you did not include that, where that provides 25% of the flow going into Latrobe River to the Gippsland Lakes? As you know, the climate variable changes, that will probably be 30% that we've contacted the Catchment Authority to go, how does this work? So it's constantly finding that information, then going back to the relevant department and go, whoopsie, you need to fix that.
Well, I really wanted to explore that, particularly for the listeners, because we're so used to seeing a headline, and I think it comes from the old days, and I'm dating myself here too because I'm older than I look, and where we got news, and the news was credible. But now they worked out, well, there's more profit in marketing, using that Bernaysian marketing principles. We have a headline, and I remember one in particular where they had a headline that says, Andrew Tate's got hold of majority of young boys. Now, I got hold of that report, and the part that they were referring to was one question where they interviewed the boys, and the boys said that what they identified with was that sometimes women are difficult to understand.
Oh.
And from that, they said Andrew Tate's got hold of all the boys. And this is how do you get past that barrier? Because a lot of times when people have a belief, that's how we operate, it's very hard to break that belief. So as soon as they've got that attachment, which is the headline is designed to do, to make that connection, and then it's harder for you to get your point across. How do you actually get that point across?
Yeah, and I'll give you a great example. So it's a bit off topic for coal, but I also interact with the PFAS contamination, which is that firefighting foam. So in 2000, and I'm very active in the Gippsland community and federally. And so I presented to The Age and we did a combined article. It was all my information. And at 2018, they wrote the headline, Gippsland Toxic Beef. Well, you could just imagine Gippsland's a huge area, and all the farmers were up in arms, and it was on the Country Hour, ABC Country Hour, and on the ABC, and they slammed it, but they didn't read the content of the article. And so here we are at 2024, we've got all these inquiries going on now. Victoria was the first one in 2015 to have an inquiry. Then all this stuff could have been started to be addressed. But actually, because of that headline, ABC shut it down and just slammed the whole thing and didn't even read anything about the points that were made in it, which, of course, then I slammed them.
Well, that's nice.
But I go, that's not on. I said, what are you doing? You're doing the exact thing that this headline's done, and you've just misquoted the subject of the article. So it's very interesting how that plays out. I've never actually thought of it in that context.
Well, it's an interesting point, and this is where I think today's age, where we're quite lucky, unless you're under 16 now, but for people over 16, you actually can access a lot more media, a lot more information than ever in history before. And now with the way AI is advancing, where AI can do the research for you, it can find all this data. So it makes it really, really difficult for people to actually use those headlines. If you step back and go, okay, what's really going on here? And you keep that open mind, we can really look at that data more effectively, which is what I'm really excited for that for the future. So coming back to here and the work that you're doing with Flow, because obviously regardless of which way we go energy-wise, and there's a couple of different debates, and we were talking about that in the pre-show, but regardless, there's still mines that need to be addressed here. There are open-cut mines that need to be addressed. What are some of the key problems that are being faced and that need to be addressed?
Yeah, so there's the geotechnical risk, and so that's quite complicated for people to understand. But when the relevant government department came out with the document based on that, they actually had a social license company come down and they had their fingerprints all over it. So the day that was released, on the same page, they had this comment that said Lake Como. So, of course, the media all went to Lake Como and ignored the risk of it. So that has frustrated me right from the start, because I first started all my research doing the subsurface, all the problems. So what we have in Latrobe Valley is a lot of groundwater has been extracted to maintain the stability of the pits. Otherwise, the aquifers that just go through them, that they've been, the coal's been cut out, everything would just collapse in.
Well, you'd think that we would be aware of that too, because even when you think about the Haunted Hills, I mean, the Haunted Hills is haunted because of the water flowing underneath, if correct. So there's a lot of underwater activity, but like you're saying, it's that has a massive impact on the mines, which needs to be addressed.
Yeah, so, that water is taken out. So consequently, we would say that the drawdown, the depressurising of the aquifer we've got this water table drop, is the probably simplest way to say it, of 130 metres.
It's a long way down.
It's huge. And so that's where people might be aware of the comments when they say, Morwell slipping into the town. You've got the complications of sinkholes with the freeway. And it's all about drainage and everything's connected.
Well, you just have to see that as you're driving along the freeway past the open cut near Morwell. Yeah. It's quite dry at the top there when you compare that to the rest of Latrobe City.
And who builds a freeway right beside an open cut pit?
Well, they build a town over the top of it.
Right, and that is the complication. So this is why we do what we do. Don't make the same mistakes. Learn from the past. Yeah. You've built 3 townships around 3 open cuts, and it's and this is the problem. If people want coal and it's going to last for a few more years, well, that means the pits get bigger. The bigger the pits, the more groundwater, the more problem to the subsurface.
You mentioned, because we know Eraring's been able to stay open for another 2 years and probably longer. seeing what's happened as far as when you look at W Station slated to close in 2028, and so you've got to replace 20% of Victoria's power in 6 years consistently, not just when it's windy or sunny.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like that's going to be possible.
No, well, and this is where people constantly ask, well, what's your opinion? Well, and it's very hard for us to talk in the future. I said, I only do step by step. Okay, let's talk about the complications. How are we going to manage this rehabilitation? How are we going to ensure, there's transparency? But then, I'm on the community reference group for AGL, and they said it is a problem about how we're going to have enough firming generation for that future. So we've come to the conclusion that coal stations, particularly Loy Yang, could be open for that bit longer. I'm not going to sort of go down, but I do suspect that it is, and that's the thing. But we are held up with stupid government regulations, people, fighting on, and just we don't move forward in a rational decision-making way.
How much of that comes back to, because you mentioned. And you did mention stupid government, but I'm going to move away from that. But we were talking about long-term decisions. You mentioned that earlier. And when we're looking at that, because you say we built a town, now I know, and I helped, as a little kid, I helped pull down your lawn. I was there with my dad and some of the friends, and we helped pull that down. But they never anticipated that town to be there as long as it was. No. How much of that is the problem where we really don't do that long-term thinking?
It's a massive problem because the departments are all soloised. There's no sort of cross-jurisdictional policy directives that go, okay, let's look at what we deal with is the watershed and the airshed. Okay, water being, the surface and, subsurface. If we keep bringing more industry down, dirty industry, well, at a point they have to, discharge the water. Well, let's just discharge it into the Latrobe River and it becomes the Seward Aqueduct, that's the whole story.
Well, Melbourne's leading with the Yarra, isn't it? That's the river that flows upside down.
And so where's the thinking to go, okay, how much can an industry sustain? If we're then looking at the airshed and how many emissions and the pollutants, and so that's what people don't realise is that, each year the 3 power stations, well, 4, we're emitting 1,500 kilograms of mercury annually. Mm. Now that it then deposits to land and water, and so then there's all that data out there about how bad mercury is. So we know that there's some little testing done here. And so one of the results was, the health costs, 1.5 billion. We know about the cardiac and the lungs, the issues. There's problems with neonatal and all sorts of that with the pollution. And so how many dirty industries can you have in a valley? So if we're going to get rid of coal, well, what the EPA should have done with the coal licence review, no, you guys really need to put better infrastructure in there to protect the people. And that's EPA's remit. But no, they work for industry.
So how do we get to that? Because it seems like, I think I'm kind of optimistic. And I think people are pretty smart. Contrary to what Einstein said, where he said the two things that are infinite being the universe and human stupidity. But I think we can be very, very smart. But if you don't know the problem or you're not looking at the data to support the problem, how do we fix it?
Exactly. So, and this is a very interesting point. I hold a lot of data and I've got it in separate places. I've got documents that don't exist online. There's documents, the URLs that have disappeared. Now, how do people in the future look back at this to go, what's the historic knowledge? Now, we know people talked about when the SEC closed and that they lost that knowledge. People were there for years. How do we keep that? I want somebody to say, I've suggested to Environment Victoria, where do people put all this collective work that I've devoted my life to? I don't want it just wasted. It needs to be part of someone's PhD. So we do know there's PhD students have come down and go, do you think we can get any health data down here? There is, because it's not in the government's best interest to prove there's a cause and effect. We
That's
have
an
this
interesting
here.
point, though, isn't it? Because when you're looking at that data, and as I mentioned before about AI doing research, which it can, but if it's not there,
Not
and this
that-
is very Stalinistic, where rewriting history or Mao or whoever, it's like you go, well, that's again, how do we solve a problem if we're not looking at it rationally? If we've got an agenda that we're
Well, this is it. So you would it's there's a lot of dedicated people, heaps of people like me that do that research. We're networking better, but we've got to be able to find that avenue that we can make sure this document stays. This information stays permanent for records. We've got consultants. I just went to a webinar the other day, and consultants using our work. And that's us being representative groups on other water bodies. And I couldn't believe it. I go, well, there it just shows you, I say we're the nobodies, and people get a bit angry with it, but we literally are. We're the nobodies. We're not, as what happened, for the listeners here, I did represent on the nuclear panel today, and I was asked what tertiary qualifications I had. I said, well, I don't need one. I said, you've got the power of one was all about
people run Enron.
Yeah, it's all about your ability to read. And then I said, I just go to the source. I ask them questions, and that's our role. We come back then to the politicians and go, you answer this. You prove to us that you've done your homework, and it's rational decision making.
What I really love about what you're talking about there, and what we need more of, is people like yourself that say, hey, because there's so many people out there that are really smart. But they just need that empowerment to actually go and say, look, I've read this and this is what it says. I'm not going to take your headline and say that's the truth. I'm actually gone into the detail. How do you encourage people to do that?
Well, it's very interesting because, again, it was one of the questions, like our group is 5 members, deliberately small, and go, well, how can you represent the community, as one of the panel members asked. And I said,
how does one ward councillor represent an entire ward?
and exactly. And I said, why are people coming to us? So individually, we have people speak to us, and they're not going to the government, they're not going to their representatives, because we've actually being heard. We've got, a focal point. People know about us, so they're ringing us up, asking questions. But the thing is, how do you train somebody to actually connect the dots? To go, you can't just get that information from one document. So I used to get a bit frustrated at the start. People would want to go, well, I say, look, I haven't got time, but I know I had to give them time. And then I would try to, like, for instance, my husband goes, what's going on here? And I said, I've taken 11 years to learn this, and you expect me to, tell you all about it in 5 minutes. No, it doesn't work like that. And that's actually what it is.
Well, that's a good point. And that's where I want to come back to, again, the government ministers who are given a report, and then they're just relaying that report, and they're not the expert. And they're relaying the parts of the headline. And this is where, have we lost that faith in the government? Because you say people are coming to you now because you're actually giving factual, real information.
Yeah, so any report that the government does, they engage the consultants on terms of reference. And you can't often get those terms of reference. So if it's an inquiry, you do know what they are, and you can certainly give them a serve and say, these are fairly limited terms of reference.
Yeah.
But it's that information. So we do ask and go, we can clearly read a document and go, oh, this is not credible for these reasons. And what was the terms of reference? So if you're looking at industry wanting to further their cause, well, they're engaging their consultants. So of course the consultant's going to do something that supports them.
Yeah.
And, but then if they come out and tell the truth, they won't get a job. And that's the problem with consultancy, environmental consultancy. They openly talk to us. We've got some who will not work for certain industries because that's their expectation. They've told us what goes on. And you only get that by engaging with these people and being, they go, oh, you actually know what you're talking about. You've read. So people do have to extend their knowledge. Someone can't tell you that. You have to learn it yourself because everybody takes things in differently. So you need to, expand your knowledge and look at different things. And if it's a word you don't understand, and then go, like, it was an example in one of the things. So if you're presented with epidemiology studies. And I thought, what's that? Well, that's gathering the health data of an area, and you're looking at that. But if you don't have that human health data, well, they'll make an assessment based on animal studies. And so this is a different. This is
slightly different.
Yeah, and this is, so they'll give you a drinking water guideline value for how much contaminant can be in the water that's safe for you, based on an animal study. Now, Australia doesn't do those studies, no data, no evidence, that stuff, but then they bag out the USA and go, but this is not in the Australian context. So I go, well, what does that mean? So you go looking into it, and it turns out that the World Health Organization had determined that this particular PFAS chemical, PFOA, was a carcinogenic, so class 1. But Australia has not determined that based on a different way of assessing cancer. And I couldn't believe it. And it said it had, even though they didn't have strong human studies, they had strong mechanistic, which is the mechanical sort of study. There was a whole heap of other work. And so Australia ignored that. And I go, what's that? And then I looked in, it's your toxicology, it's the biology, it's all these really, intricate sort of science works. And so Australia just said it's going to ignore that just because they haven't done it and they assess it differently. God, oh. Anyhow, I did call them out in the submission I just put in the other day. Okay, not on.
I love it. And I love that you're questioning that. We've only got about a minute to go. What would you want to leave people with to get passionate about the type of work you're doing, to question these things, to look deeper, to actually not just take things at face value? What would you like to leave people with?
To understand what is high-level information, what is cherry-picked facts, what could you go in and look for, and you can't get your information on generalisations. You have to go to the area, and that's why I don't do climate change and all the big pictures. I go, what's going on in our area? What's going on into the rivers? What's going on into our area? And what projects are coming here?
Fantastic. Tracy, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way to reach out?
Our website is www.flow.org. We've got a Facebook page as well, and we're all over. So, yeah, fantastic. It's all good.
Tracy, thank you very much for taking time to be on the show. Share your passion, your excitement, and the great work you're doing here in Latrobe City to keep our nature beautiful.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.